I feel like diet culture sets you up to never be good enough.
Did you burn 500 calories on the treadmill today? No? Me either.
I mean, anybody can sit with us. We're just really not about diet culture.
But literally, happiness doesn't come from a low-calorie, high-intensity life. I actually do like carrots.
I do too. They're my favorite.
Welcome to the Fit Fueled Free podcast.
So basically, diets suck.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 67. I'm Danielle.
And I'm Jenna.
And today we are doing another episode of reasons why we personally have gained benefit from healing our relationship with food and being anti-diet culture, kind of like a growth and just reflection episode. So we are both pretty tired, so we're going to give this a go and just kind of roll with it.
Yeah, let's do it. You want me to start off?
Yeah, go.
You want to go like back and forth?
Yeah.
I mean, okay. Okay, so as I was like thinking about this episode, I feel like the past year, like just 2020 in general, and the nature of everything that went down and how it was like so unexpected and so like unconventional, and probably like a year out of all of our lives that like we've never really experienced. And I feel like it really made me like kind of like reflect on just like the growth and where I was at in terms of like my relationship with food and exercise, just because I feel like my normal routine was completely disrupted, as I'm sure like a lot of people's were.
Yeah.
And I'm sure for some it went both ways. Some people probably really like flourished, and others I'm sure had an incredibly hard time. But as I was just thinking about it, I think this past year especially, like, I mean, I've been working on like my relationship with food for years now, but it was really cool to look back on like just this past year and realize like this is probably like the most freedom that I have felt around food. Oh man, like in ever. Like I was thinking about like little like weekend things that like Landon and I would do, and like whether we would like make brunch at home or like do like pickup brunch from restaurants, or like when they started to open up and we could go back in and like get brunch at restaurants. Like I legit, there was never a thought in my mind like about like, oh, how many calories is this? Like, whereas before, I think that was something that like was always probably looming to an extent, just because like it was something that, you know, was ingrained in my brain for so long.
Yeah.
But like I really like, it's just insane when I think about like I literally like can be around any type of food now, and I'm just like, I'm in tune enough to know whether I want it or not. And I like don't even think about like, oh, how many calories is, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I feel like that's really taken off and like progressed even more like this past year, which is really cool.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's funny how, like, until you get some time to do reflection and see hindsight, you don't realize, like, some of the things that, just because it's not just disordered eating or eating disorders, like, then we have the whole layer of diet culture that is just so pervasive. It's hard to really, like, separate what is appropriate and what is health promoting for you, like mentally, and it's like still a lingering thing or something we learned because our culture is psychotic.
Yeah.
So I would say the thing that comes to my mind most over this past year is just like on the same note of being out of routine. Physical activity has really just been, it's not been non-existent, but just like I have shared that I thrive in doing like group workouts, and that's really what I prefer. And from March till September, we didn't have that option. And then we joined a kickboxing gym when things started to be like opening again. And then we moved to Denver. So, and like, there's not really a good option for joining something out here right now,
Mhm.
with where things are at with COVID. So, anyway, just realizing how actually helpful I think that has been. Like, I'm frustrated because I don't have that drive to like be disciplined, quote unquote. Like, that that's not my style of like wanting to
Mhm.
do at home workouts. And like, I can go outside and walk and everything like that. But just like yesterday, I did a like 20-minute yoga video while Matt was cooking dinner. And it was really like low key. And it just felt very in tune with what my body needed. And the thing about all of that is, with me not having a consistent workout routine, I've gained some weight. Like, I have no idea what I weigh. I don't weigh myself, and I don't even have access to a scale. Um, and I don't care really, but I can tell in somehow the way like my clothes fit and just like feeling it in my body, and just observing the fact that I know that that changed because I've been less active. And I'm not in a place where I want to go start running because I'm trying to like lose several pounds, because
Mhm.
that most people would probably say that isn't an issue. But I think for me, trying to like, I mean, we talk about this all the time. If I were to try and even put it under a guise of, oh, I'm just need to get active again, but inside I was like, oh, I'm trying to like lose a couple more pounds because I know that my body would probably rest at a slightly lower weight and my clothes would fit a little bit differently if I were to add this. But there's nothing right now that I really want to be doing that I can do outside of walking and doing some yoga. And like, I would love to buy a Peloton and do that, but we don't have that money right now. And I'm not going to join a group class until like
Mhm.
things become a little bit more normal. So it's just been interesting to kind of sit in that space of realizing that like it's not like I'm going on movement strike, but like I'm not going to do
Mhm.
it for the reason of burning calories. And if I were to think about it that way, like that could really be a slippery slope, I
Mhm.
think, into just going into much more negative places, with my body image. And so just challenging myself. And I say all this like with a grain of salt, because I do realize like I've always held thin privilege no matter how my weight has fluctuated. And so I don't say this like I feel like sorry for myself or sad for myself that my body has changed. But I really am more sharing this because I think that it's almost celebratory that I've come to a place where I'm not torturing myself because I noticed my body changing. I'm just being me. And joyful movement is so important to me, and like honoring that. It's not something I'm willing to risk until
Mhm.
like I probably would go for runs if it was like not freezing cold. Um,
Yeah.
it was nice today, but like I'm not going to suffer in the weather. Like, I see people running here in all temperatures, and I just like wonder like, is this is this joyful? And like, I know like Landon's training for a marathon. Like, sometimes you
Mhm.
have to do things like that in inclement weather to get your training done. Some like if it's for a purpose like that, but like I wonder the amount of people I see running in snow and all these things. I'm just like, what are you doing? And that just sounds awful to me. Like, great if it's good for that person, but I'm just going on a really long tangent. But the moral of the story is I've found a place where even though I noticed my body changing, I didn't react
Mhm.
by restricting my intake in any way. I didn't react by like forcing myself to do movement that I didn't want to do. And that feels really like respectful. And
Yeah.
um, I think it's really hard because in our society that regards like being as thin as possible and like being healthy, but the quote unquote, like, what I actually mean by that is being as fit as possible. I think that it could come across like people being really lazy. Um, and that's just something I really encourage reflection on, because I don't really believe in inherent laziness. And this has been such a weird year for everyone anyway. But I don't like that excuse that, like, oh, it's okay if you gained weight during a pandemic. Like, it's okay if you gain weight like anytime.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like we get some free pass. Like, I feel like even that, I see that, and it's like, I understand where that's coming from, like trying not to beat people up, but like, what if there wasn't a pandemic and I was working from home and wasn't super active and didn't have money to be doing my group classes? Like, those things are all like very real possibilities
Mm-hmm.
and reality for many people. And so it's like, so would I be lazy, or like then would I not be taking care of myself if I didn't have this excuse?
Mm-hmm.
And so I just think have thought about that so much this year. And just giving yourself the ultimate permission to like just rest as much as you need to. And sure, I believe in the importance of movement, and like I take walks and things, and I will find my groove again. Like, I know I will. It's just like that space to separate punishment,
Mm-hmm.
which I think a lot of what I've done in my history of exercise, which has probably been why I've been so resistant to a lot of it in the past few years.
Yeah.
Like, I just realized that I'm more accepting of my body changing, um, because I don't like desire to go down those paths anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I think that that shows so much growth, though, that you can sit there and resonate and like kind of fumble around with it in your head and be like, recognize the fact that like you don't want to get back into exercise for like the wrong intention. Like, I think that that just shows how much work and how much freedom you do truly feel, because, you know, if you were still stuck living under like the realm of like the diet culture mentality, your brain would be telling you you have to work out to, you know, lose this weight that you gained
Mm-hmm.
for whatever reason. And the fact that you're like, I'm literally not going to work out just because of that reason. Like, you're in a phase where you're like, I don't really want to move as much and I can't do the movement I want to do. So I'm not going to force myself to do something I don't want to do it. Like, I don't want to do just for the sake of like burning calories. And I think that that is like the ultimate like growth, like such a huge growth flag to be like, to be able to be there and be at that place.
And I think too, like, for full transparency, I won't say that it never bothers me. And that's where, like, I continue to question and challenge my weight bias, because
Yeah.
there's just always something more to uncover that I haven't thought of
Mm-hmm.
before.
Yeah.
Um, and I realized that I've had a really long-standing history of body checking by feeling for my hip bones.
Yeah. I
And
think you've
that's
shared this before.
huh?
I said, I think you've shared that
Have I?
before, or at least to a degree, some, yeah, to a
Okay.
degree. I mean, keep going with it,
Yeah.
but
Um, but I think that I've been doing that for like almost like as long as I can remember being aware of
Mhm,
my body. And
mhm,
just like when I catch myself doing it, like now I'm fully aware of it, because honestly, I don't think I realized that that was a behavior, up until pretty recently. Even though
mm,
that probably seems super obvious, like it had become a habit, and but it was a measure of me checking to see if I was thin enough,
mhm.
because that was something that I could feel,
Yeah.
when I was at my lowest weight. And
Mhm,
so just realizing, like, in like touching your own body, like while showering or like moisturizing or something, and realizing like, things are not always going to be the same, but I like just challenging that like natural reaction that I realize I've had for so long. Um,
yeah.
and like that is such a ingrained behavior that I like know now that like,
Mm-hmm.
working with eating disorders, like that's something we talk about a lot, and it's like crazy to me how that just seemed, because we talk about that, like the thigh gap, like the hip
Mm-hmm.
dip, like what is the line down your stomach? That's called something too. Like all these things that I've heard people bring to me of reasons why
Yeah.
they needed to be thinner.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's 100% a form of body checking, but that is become like a
Yep.
societal standard.
Yeah.
And so like I don't want to measure my self-worth based on whether or not I can feel my hip bones. Like what the hell?
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
is something like I think is a little bit more recent of realizing that I still did.
Yeah.
And just feeling, I think, sorry, I'm continuing to talk and
You're
I
fine.
didn't bounce back and forth.
You're
I'm
fine.
word vomiting. I think that I felt almost a sense of like pride because I've shared like I gained weight from my eating disorder and just like my reckless habits in life. And then I ended up settling at a lower point for a long time. And I think even though I knew that that really had not, like, that was just my body, I think that because of our culture idealizing thinness, that I felt some sense of pride in that. And because I um, was such just like a mess of a human being when I was at my heaviest weight, I think it's almost triggering for me to be like, oh, like I could gain weight and not have a binge drinking problem or have a
Mm.
binge eating problem or
Mm-hmm.
be purging, like all of these things. And that's just kind of like a weird thing to think about is like there is no pride in where your body lands because
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't my doing that brought it there, but I think because healing my eating disorder ended up landing me in a thinner body because of my set point and just because of what my behaviors were. I think that like deep down kind of gave me the wrong message about it.
Mm-hmm.
And just continuing to challenge that part because I don't actually think that. But then it was like, oh, like I know my body has changed. And like I said, I have no desire to weigh myself, but it's kind of annoying when your clothes don't fit anymore,
Mm-hmm.
or some of them don't. And it's like,
Yeah.
ugh, like you feel like it's a personal failure. What am I doing
Yeah.
wrong? Because that's what
Mm-hmm.
society tells you, even though this is our 67th episode and I'm an eating disorder dietitian, like I'm still not immune
Yeah.
from these
Yeah.
thoughts that like are everywhere. And just like calling them out constantly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I literally don't want that for myself. And I'm not willing to
Yeah.
do anything about it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd be stuck either way.
Yeah, but I think awareness is powerful. So the fact that you can even, be aware and in tune with that and be able to like challenge it and call it out, like that still shows like a ton of growth.
Yeah, and like honestly, I don't think I would, just because of my like mission with our podcast and just like in general as a dietitian, if I was feeling like I was actively like struggling with something disordered, I probably wouldn't talk about it until it was something that I had really like
Yeah.
reflected on, because I
Yeah.
think that can become like a really toxic space. And so I want to make sure like that is understood too. Like, yes, I struggle in the human condition, but like these aren't things that are like making me think, oh, like I
Mm-hmm.
can't do my job or I need to like seek therapy for them
Yeah.
specifically. It's just kind of like because I'm so immersed in this world and just noticing these things as I continue to heal my relationship with food. That's like kind of where I'm coming from. Not that there's anything wrong with struggling if you are, but that's not something that I like would actively want to
Yeah.
be talking about
Yeah.
on
No,
our
that makes sense.
podcast, just for like clarity.
Yeah. No, it makes sense.
I know you know that. Okay, what you got, Jen?
I guess kind of to piggyback off what you were saying in a sense, I mean, I used to run all the time, which if you're not new here, you obviously know. And I think up until maybe the last year as well, even more so now, especially also that like Landon is marathon training. Even though like I heavily like decreased the amount of running that I was doing and like really like let go of the reins on that and kind of shifted my focus in terms of like what form of movement I was doing and what like brought me joy. I still think that like because I had been a runner for so long, played soccer my whole life, like running felt ingrained in me, and I still like do have like a deep love for running. Like I think I'll always have that, but it almost felt like I even when I like had pulled back significantly, I still think that I felt this pressure to still incorporate running at least like once every single week just to like still I don't know like if it was I had to prove to myself that I was like still a runner. I don't know what it was, but like there was this like pressure I felt to like still run um like get in one run at least a week. And I would say probably the last like 6 months, like I think just because I've continuously like tried to tune inward and be like, okay, like what movement am I enjoying right now? And like the runs weren't bringing me as much joy. Like I've been able to slowly like loosen the reins even more and like loosen these like this grip I had on it that I really didn't even know I like still was kind of holding.
Yeah.
Because I would say for the last like 6 months, honestly, like there have been weeks on weeks on weeks where like I haven't even gone for one run. And I don't think I really even realized it until like Landon started marathon training. And like I'm competitive by nature. I've played, like I said, soccer my whole life. So I've like competition is just kind of like part of me, like a healthy competition. And so um there have been so many times recently where like Lan and I are talking about it. I'm like, man, like why couldn't you have been into running like when I was into running? Because like Landon did not run like at all when I was like really into it. And I'm like, it would have been so much fun to run together. And like when he first started marathon training, I think I felt a little bit of pressure to like, oh, like can I join you for a run? Or like, oh, like Landon's running X amount of miles this week. Like, do I need to be doing that? Like, and so
Yeah.
to be able to like catch that and be like, no, like he's marathon training, like that's his like goal right now. Like I'm on like a different path. Like we're not competing. Kind of like made me realize like, oh, I think like running was still maybe like had this a little bit of a hold over me. And so it's been like cool for me to challenge that. And granted, I have gone on some runs, like his shorter ones, like at the beginning of his training, just because I was like, yeah, it's a Saturday and it's nice out. Like I'll join you. But like even now it's been cool to watch myself. Like he's like, okay, I'm going for like 6 mile run, going for a 10 mile run. And I think even like a year ago, I would have been like, oh my gosh, like, well, I need to do that. Or like, can I join? And now I'm like, okay, like go have fun. Like I'll see you in a couple hours. And I think there's still probably like, again, for transparency, like you were just saying, like there's probably still points and moments where that like thought hits me. I'm like, oh, like maybe I should have gone for a run with him because he like runs a lot on Sundays. And those are the days right now that I'm like doing absolutely nothing in terms of like, I mean, there's multiple days a week, but like Sundays are my day where I'm like, if I don't want to get out of bed, like I'm not even going to get out of bed kind of deal.
Yeah.
And so for me to be able to like fight that mentality and be like, nope, like you can go for your 10-mile run and I'm going to sit here on the couch and like be okay. Like that's been like a cool thing to realize, but still like make sure I have to constantly check in with myself and like challenge that to like not let it have that like super strong hold over me. So
that's a really big deal.
Yeah, I guess it is.
Like really big.
Yeah, it is.
I'm happy for you that like you can be supportive of him rather than having that like the like ugly side of being competitive and compulsive about having to do that because that's just like not what we want in supporting our partners with something. So that's like cool too. Like it's not only how it affects us, but how it affects like the people we love when we're not in a good place with this stuff. So that's awesome. When is he doing the Shamrock? Okay.
So he's got like I guess it's March something. I don't know the exact date, but he's like a month or a little less than or a little more than a month.
That's exciting.
Yeah. Do you have anything else?
I'm sure that I do. I'm trying to think. I've had a long day. Like I didn't accurately respond to your text message, but I've also had a really like draining day.
You're good.
And we signed up for a meal delivery kit, and we had done this before with Blue Apron. But I thought of that more as like in the class of like eating out, because it was like something we did for fun occasionally. We didn't get it like all the time, but we're just like in a little bit of a rut with me just being like mentally tired of talking about what people are going to eat all day long with my job, and just like needing someone else to like put fun recipes together for me. So I signed us up for Green Chef, and I picked that one because they're supposed to be one of the more environmentally friendly like meal delivery services, and that is something that matters a lot to me. But where I'm going with this is that the like calories are printed on the recipe cards, and that's not something like I'm used to having any access to, because the last time I like knew I was eating super low calorie, like obviously I know roughly what's in, but I don't actively I do not actively count that. But the last time I like had something that was portioned on purpose for a reason was when I did that clean eating meal plan, like 5 or 6 years ago. And the calorie ranges are really like broad on these different recipes. And when I was looking at it, I kind of was like, oh, well, that's interesting. Like, and I for sure would have lost my shit seeing some of the discrepancies in numbers, and just not having maybe estimated that something would have been what it was, and thinking this is just like an acceptable thing to be eating for a meal, and just having those numbers like displayed around a meal, and it not really, like, I really did not care about it. That was cool. Because certainly that was something that was, I used to try and keep myself to 1,500 calories a day. And I was active. This was like in college when I was really active. That was like my number.
So it was mine too.
Oh, really? I don't know what I did that landed me on that. I probably calculated my resting metabolic rate and then added a little bit more, because that's something I would do when I was disordered and access knowledge. But I remember this one very specific sandwich that I would make. Like, I've always loved making egg sandwiches, and I like to put avocado on them. And I just remember being either like a junior or senior in college, and just like counting up in the morning, like, oh my God, like this is X number of calories, which means I'm already like this much percent into my X number, or my 1,500 I shared that I thought I had to stick at, and it just being so anxiety provoking. And if I had gotten a meal delivery kit that told me that this many calories were in my meal, I would have had a meltdown. And also, I think even like go a little bit past like full-blown eating disorder, just like becoming a dietitian and telling people that X number of calories is like acceptable for a meal, I still would have lost my shit and been like, oh, you can't eat that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's not healthy.
Mm-hmm.
So that is really exciting because I'm super stoked about this. Like, the food was really good
Yeah.
last night, and there's just all kinds of recipe options that I just wouldn't think to make on my own, nor would I take time to procure that many random ingredients. Like, it's just convenience in that regard for having just like some variety.
Yeah.
And I'm actually like thrilled about it rather than being terrified.
Yeah.
And that's exciting. Like, that's, I think, wanting food freedom, that's a big one. Just like the idea of wanting to be able to eat what you want, and
Mm-hmm.
like when, especially when facts get thrown in front of you, not retreating from that because you know that this is something you would have not done in the
Yeah.
past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I do like, I've only had literally one recipe, but Green Chef so far, they're delicious.
It's cool.
And the little plastic, like, I don't know if they always are recyclable, but like the little like pouches that like the aioli or and the ketchup came in because we made burgers last night. Um, they like say recycle on them. So I think
Oh, cool.
everything that they sent for packaging can be recycled. So I think that's part of why it's green,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
which makes me happy because I really hate throwing all the stuff that food comes in the garbage when
Mm-hmm.
it's not recyclable. So
Yeah.
that's nice too.
Yeah. Totally. Let's see. What else do I have? Um, this might be the only other one that I can think of right off the top of my head. In terms of like being super in tune with like hunger cues, I would say I became more in tune, I think, with like fullness cues before hunger, maybe. So I think like
Mhm.
within, like, does that make sense? I don't know if that happens for everyone, but for whatever reason, like it would be easier for me to identify fullness as opposed to like hunger, unless it was like extreme hunger for like a very long
Yeah,
time.
I think
Um,
it's blanket, like pretty common. Yeah.
okay, yeah. And so I think for the longest time, which I think it goes through phases. So like, so I don't think that I was wrong in doing this, but when I was like healing my relationship with food, I was making sure, like for me was like making sure I ate breakfast by like a certain time every day to make sure that I was eating
Mhm.
enough throughout the day. And so for a while, I wouldn't say it was necessarily like a food rule because I was still like finding freedom
Mhm.
and like breaking away from like the rules that I used to live by. But I do think it became this like idea in my head that I was like, okay, I have to eat breakfast by this time, no matter how I'm feeling every single day to make sure that like I eat enough
Mhm.
within the day. And so, like I said, I think for a while, yes, that was good. And I needed
Mhm.
to do that because it was like the phase of like, okay, making sure I ate enough. But I've been realizing again, probably the last 6 months, maybe this whole year. And that's probably just because I've been home more and I'm like, haven't been as busy in the mornings. Well, now I am, but like the beginning of last year when like we were all kind of like everyone was stuck at home and not going anywhere. Um, I became a lot more in tune with the fact that like there are some days that my body just like I'm literally not hungry until 10 or like 11, like later than. I don't
Mhm.
like giving out the times, so I didn't mean to say that time because in case anyone's listening, and I don't want to give anyone like a rule in their head, but like um I was realizing like, oh, there are some days like I'm not as hungry as early as what I was like
Mhm.
forcing myself to eat. And I think for a little bit I was fighting that just because I was so terrified of like, oh, well, if I wait to eat, then I might like get back in this cycle of like not eating enough. Um, and like, like restricting again.
Mhm.
Um, but I've like really been challenging that and like really tuning in like first thing in the morning to like see how I'm feeling. And it's been really cool. Like it's not the same every day, which I think is awesome because we say that all the time. Like our body's needs are going to change daily based off of so many different
Mhm.
factors. And so I've really been able to kind of like dissect that and given myself the freedom to like not have to eat by a certain time if I'm not hungry. And sure, there are some days where I wake up and I'm like, oh wow, like eating is the first thing I want to do. Um, but there are other days where I'm like, like I'm actually like I'm not hungry yet, and I'm going to tune into this and honor it, and then like eat when I do feel that hunger. And there's no like, and then if I'm hungry 2 hours later, like I'm like, okay, like I can eat again. Whereas I think before I was still like kind of trying to pace it like within a certain time frame, especially like in the fitness world, because there's so many like breakfast, wait this amount of hours, snack, wait this amount of hours, lunch, wait this amount of hours, whatever. And it's
Mhm.
like you almost like that in and of itself becomes like a rule again. And it's easy to like be like, oh, well, I gotta, like, what time is it? Like, oh, I guess I gotta eat regardless of how I'm feeling. And so it's just been a really like cool process to even challenge that, which again, I don't think it wasn't disordered when I was doing it, because I was doing it
Yeah.
for this like keeping myself in check to make sure I was eating enough. But like since I've like think I've grown even more, I'm like realizing and understanding like even more so now like what actual like true food freedom is, and like honoring your hunger and like noticing how like it changes literally every day for me, and I'm like able to be in tune with that for the most part. And that's yeah, that's just been a really cool thing to unwrap.
Yeah, because you know that you're not going to starve yourself if you wait. So it's
Right.
no
Yeah.
longer disordered to do something like that. Oh, that's so exciting.
Yeah. Like even today I had lunch at like 3:50 because of the way my day was. Like I just like didn't have time to eat, and like usually that's like late for me. And then we like turned around and we had dinner like less than, I don't know, like 2 hours after. And I think in the past I would have been like, oh my gosh, like this is way too close. But I was like, well, it's dinner, we're eating. Like I'll eat however much my body tells me it wants to eat. And
Mhm.
like that's that. And there was no like stress or like second thought. So I was like, look at you, Jenna. Like the growth
Yeah.
is possible even when you like didn't think you could grow in something. Because I think years ago I would have never thought that I would have been able to be at a place that I'm at with it now.
I think you said a couple episodes ago that it's really hard when you're thinking about this healing work because one day you're just going to wake up and something
Mm.
has changed, but
Yeah.
it's not like it is incrementally improving, but like it just happens. Like stuff
Yeah.
just clicks and like changes and then you're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, like this is different."
Hmm.
But it's hard to describe it other than that.
Yeah.
I actually had a similar situation. Now that we're getting into this, I'm gonna have 1,000 things that come to my mind. Don't worry, I won't share all of them. Um, but I just did my cooking group at work last week also. I don't know why I was on back-to-back weeks, but I had eaten like a full dinner by 5:30, and that's like so early for us. And by the time Matt got home and was eating, I was like, I'm kind of feeling second dinner. Like I'm hungry. Like I know I just ate, but I'm hungry again. And
Mhm.
I like didn't care that I technically had already eaten dinner. I was like, if my body's telling me it needs more food right now, like it was too much. Like it certainly was not something I was going to be able to just like have a small snack and go to bed. Like I was like, I need to eat like another meal. And
Mhm.
that was cool to give myself that permission because that's very like taboo in
Mhm.
like the health realm, like second dinner, that's what I like to call it.
Mhm.
But I actually do that like that's not a completely infrequent thing for me. That's not the first time that's ever happened.
Yeah.
But that situation specifically, I was like, oh, like this is cool to have this freedom to be able to eat
Yeah.
again because I'm
Mhm.
hungry and like who cares?
Mhm. Yeah. That is cool.
Um,
Yeah, it's cool to see that shift within yourself. You're like, I'm not guilty about it.
mhm.
Like, I'm actually honoring my body. I'm not restricting or
Yeah,
keeping, or like we've talked about this before, like that feeling of like being proud to go to bed hungry. It's like,
yeah. And like waking up with horrendous guilt for what you had
yeah.
eaten the night before, like it's so nice not to get that
Mhm.
anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, because I work at an eating disorder center, like, I mean, I'm sure there are people that struggle with their relationship with food there, but like people that I'm around, I'm not seeing that. And we eat like donuts so regularly, and it's so lovely because coming from a place where that was like poison that wasn't allowed to enter the building, like, oh my gosh.
Hmm.
It's like it's so nice to just have normalcy and like be able to
Yeah.
eat something different as part of
Hmm.
your breakfast. Like, and
Hmm.
that's such a guilty quote unquote food and like unhealthy quote unquote. It's just like nice to be around that again of like it's okay to have these foods like when you want them, and if someone brings them in, not being like, oh no, they brought
Hmm.
donuts. And like also it's okay to say no too because
Yeah.
I can have them whenever.
Hmm.
It's just very exciting. And we keep a candy jar in our like that's a thing. Like there's candy
Yeah.
everywhere, and it's like that used to be such a like I had to make my rule of you don't eat sweets at home or at work so that you can eat them at home. And that's what I did my first job. And it's
Hmm.
like if I want some chocolate, I eat some chocolate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So that is
I love that.
like that's a big thing with especially changing work environments of like having that freedom because I had it in my households like working from home that was fine, but like now being in a work setting where that's just like normal again,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
actually normal because no one's walking around saying toxic diet culture crap because we are aware of our surroundings and like
Hmm.
we're there for a reason.
Yep.
That's really nice too.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Do you have anything else that you want to share?
Um, mm, I think the only other thing I can think of is we've gotten like even more adventurous in like what we make for dinner. Like I'm a very much a creature of habit, not because like I know what's in the
Mm-hmm.
food that I like it has nothing to do with like, oh, I know how many calories this food is. I know what I like and I'm like I could be content eating it. But I think like especially when like not much else was going on last year when we were like stuck at home and we were like we do date nights every Wednesday and we I mean even when the world felt normal, we weren't even like we would not go out every single
Mm-hmm.
week for date night, but we were still trying to like how can we make this feel like a different night at home even though we're literally at home, which is what we've been doing every single night. um we like just started branching out in terms of like our meals and like what we would make and like ingredients, and I've shared this before, there are certain things that like I do limit because of a health like autoimmune issue, but like
Yeah.
even just like include I don't know like even like I said last week, I think it was last week's episode, I was like I've realized that like I really like cheese and for years I like didn't let myself eat it. And I mean again I have to like be careful with like how much of that I eat because of my skin, but like we've been doing a lot more meals with like cheese, and granted some nights I will do like the dairy free cheese, but there are other nights where I'm like I just want to have the cheese and like I'm gonna have it with our meal and like not overthink it and not worry about it and stress about it. And so it's been cool for us to do that and like break away from like only looking at like gluten-free, you know, meals to make. And obviously if you have like a dietary issue with that, like you're allergic or like intolerant, don't force yourself to eat something that's going
Yeah.
to like cause you pain, but like it's just yeah, it's been cool to branch out and like not be so uptight about that. Um, and it's been fun and it's made our meals more fun. So
That's awesome. I'm
yeah.
glad we did this episode, not only because like I think this is an important thing to talk about, but like I like hearing about the things that you're like I love hearing about your growth. So this was fun.
Oh, I know.
Like hear
I
that
know.
stuff too.
I know.
Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. Um As always, we super appreciate ratings and reviews. We're continuing to upload our recordings onto YouTube because we're recording the video as well as audio. You can keep up with us on our shared Instagram page at Fit Fueled Free. My personal page is Dietitian Dani Cast, and Jenna's is Jenna Fit. And don't forget to check out her app, Level Up Fit, if you have not yet. Are you running a promotion right now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 50% off for all new users for your first month.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that is that, and we look forward to talking to you guys next week.
Bye, guys.